So let's now actually start working on building and designing our About page. So now that all of our templates are done and all of the dynamic content, we can start building some of the static pages and start working with some of the clever design elements that we have available to us through Elementor and Essential add-ons. So let's come along to our pages, and then under About, let's select Edit and then Edit with Elementor. So in this lesson, we're just going to build out the hero element of this page. So we can start working on that now. So to get us started, I'm actually just going to go ahead and import in import a template. And this is going to be our hero section, just so that we already have that that quirky little curve at the bottom and that gradient already in place. So that is okay. So now let's come to the hero parent, the parent container, that we're going to be working in, and just start removing the image. I'm going to change this to a classic background type, and attached to this lesson as a resource is going to be this About Us banner. So let's drag that in and we can start working with this. Don't forget to give it an alt text and to optimize the image. Then we can select, and then we just want to come along and set the position of this to center and the display size to cover. Now we can see that the opacity of the overlay is probably way too high. Let's reduce that down a little bit, maybe 0.5 or even 0.6, 0.55 is okay. I'm going to go 0.6. And that is looking a lot better now. So now what I'm thinking is just having a single column here in the hero, just with a brief message from the CEO, the director, maybe yourself, or somebody else. And we can do that by, first of all, just deleting this first container. We can delete this second container because we only need that one container. So now we just have the one single container here. And now what we want to do is we want to add in a subheading and a heading. So let's go with a heading. And then for the subheading, let's again just use that dual color. So we'll use that just above our heading there. Now we can see that the direction of that container is set to horizontal. So let's change that to vertical. And then whilst we're here, let's do align items start. Justify content is not already in the center. Let's make that in the center. So that is okay. And now let's drag in a divider. So a divider just under that. And then we can use maybe something new like an info box. And we can then we can add ourselves in as the director or the CEO and introduce ourselves this way. So those are all of the elements. Now, of course, we need to get to designing this. So first thing that I'm going to do is reduce the width of this container. So at the minute, the content width is box. Let's change that to full width. And let's now maybe change this to maybe 40% is okay for me. In fact, I might even go 30, 35. I'm also going to add some padding to the left-hand side there. So, sorry, margin to the left-hand side. So let's maybe, and let's do this as a percentage as well. So let's maybe make this 5% or 7%, 6% of margin to the left-hand side. I'm going to link them values back together again and add the default 15. We can obviously edit that as we come to build this out. So now let's just start building out this actual element here. So I can see that these elements down here have somehow fallen out of our container. So let's drag them into our container just like that. And now we can start editing. So let's start with the dual heading. We can just have this as About Us, for example. So the first part of the title can be About Us. The last part we can delete, and the text below it we can delete. Let's hide the icon. Let's leave this as the H1 element. Now let's come to the styling. Let's change the default padding and margin. So just check that to remove the defaults. Now we can also come down to the color and typography. Let's select the dual color. And now let's go ahead and play around with these a little bit. So maybe accent for the top. And then maybe, yeah, maybe that purple or maybe a pinky color. Or no, that one obviously does not look good. Let's go with the accent and then just change that slightly to something like that. That looks cool. I'm happy with that. Now we just need to change the typography. So let's change this to an accent. Let's also change the size here. So let's change this to an REM of say 1.4. We'll leave that as 500. I'm happy with that. It's already capitalized, which is what I want. So now we can move on to our heading. So now let's say something like, I don't know, we design, or our passion is designing beautiful websites for your future projects. Let's just say, again, you would obviously edit that. I mean, that's just the first thing that came to my mind. So I'm going to leave that as that. So now H2 is absolutely fine for this. Let's come to style and change this to our accent. And now the typography to primary. So now, do we want to make this uppercase? No, but we do want to capitalize it. So I'm going to capitalize it like that. I'm actually going to reduce that line height just slightly to maybe a 2.4. 2.4, maybe no, 2.3, it's okay. So that is okay. Now we have our divider here. So let's come along to the divider. Do we want to change the color? Let's see what that looks like as accent as well. I am going to have that as an accent. I am going to remove the gap. And now we can move on to the icon box. To the info box. So the info box is another new element that we can use with essential add-ons. And again, lots of cool stuff that we can do with this. So let's first look at the info box type. So with the image and icon on top, that isn't what I'm trying to achieve. I want to have an image of me or the CEO or director. So we're going to have an image there on the left there, and then we can introduce them with that text to the right of it. So let's carry this on. So we've got here an image or icon. So we can choose whether we want none, a number, an icon, or an image. So let's go with image here so that we can select an image. So we're going to select that. And now I have this image here, which I'm going to attach as a resource. So you can go ahead and attach this one. Let's paste him, let's copy him in. So this is going to be the hypothetical director of this web development agency. And that's absolutely fine. Now we can change the position of that. So I'm going to select the middle. So let's now come down to the info box content. So we can choose the title tags. I'm going to leave that as a H4. We've got the content type. We can even use saved templates here if we wanted to use a template. But we're going to just be using a content again. So let's now come along and just change the title and the content here. So the title, let's just give it my name. So Ricky Wallace. That is not how you spell my name. Ricky Wallace, like that. And now we can say I am the founder and CEO. Something like that. So now, of course, we need to get to the styling of this. So now let's come along to style. So you can see you've got the hover style of this as well. So you can completely change the look and feel on hover. Now I'm not going to bother with anything like that, but I am just going to come to the normal styling. So we've got the image resizer here. I'm going to go with maybe a 55 pixel. That looks okay for me. So lots of stuff we can change. We have padding if we wanted to edit and remove padding. This is for the image, of course. And we've also got our color and typography down here. So this is what I am interested in playing around with. So the title style color, let's maybe make this accent. Or in fact, we might even make this a jet black color for this one. just to keep it a little bit different to the accent purple. Now we've got the typography there. I'm going to select primary, and now let's just make that size a little bit smaller, maybe a 1.2 or 1.1. No, go over 1.2. That is okay. And now, in fact, I might even make this an accent, which is roboto. So let's make that, see what that looks like as this. Yeah, I'm going to leave this as a roboto, 1.1 maybe. That is now defaulted to pixel. 1.5. We had this problem last time, didn't we? So, I mean, I would just need to refresh this page. And rather than do that, I'm just going to select our primary text and just make that maybe a 1.2. So that is okay. So now we've got the content styling. So let's now change the color and typography of the content, which is the founder and CEO section. So the color we can again select black. And now the typography, I'm going to select text. Now, of course, we can see that we've got margin there. So I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm going to uncheck that. And that is obviously just closed the gap between the title and the content there. So I'm also going to add a little bit of negative margin, not to the top of the title, but to the top of the content, just to close that gap even further so that it looks a bit like that. I'm also going to make that font a little bit smaller. So maybe a 0.9 there, maybe even a 0.8. I'm going to leave that as a 0.8. And for that, I am happy. So now we have this cool section here. So, I mean, we could absolutely add some border, a box shadow to this. We could add a gentle box shadow so this stands out. We could obviously add a background color to this if we wanted to add a background color. Maybe we wanted to add a white and then maybe make this a little bit transparent like this. We could absolutely do that. I'm going to soften those edges with maybe just a gentle 10 border radius. And something like that is, I think, looks pretty cool. So again, you can style this however you want. We could even come to the container here, change the background color to accent, and then have all of the content inside set as white. So we could have something like this, not background color, and have that looking like this. So that would be another option. In fact, I think this is actually looking even better. So I am going to run with it like this. The About Us now, we can change the dual color heading to those two lighter colors. So let's maybe go with a primary and secondary. So we could leave it something like that, or we could even make it lighter still. So let's come along, make that even lighter, and let's make that even lighter so that it looks like that. Now, for this heading, I'm just going to add some negative margin to the top, just to remove that space between the default padding that we get from that dual color heading. So it looks something like that. For this line here, for the divider, I'm actually going to add a motion effect to this. I always like the look of a motion effect on these dividers. So entrance animation, we could do a fade in left so that it fades in like that. We could also do the same with the text as well, but I'm just going to leave that for the divider for now. You guys can absolutely do that to absolutely everything. In fact, since we're here, let's just do that. Only takes 2 seconds. Motion effect, entrance animation, fade in left. And then the same with the heading here. Let's come down to our motion effects, entrance, fade in left. Let's now add a slight delay of 200. And for the divider, I'm going to add a small delay of motion effects, small delay of 400. And then the info box will have a motion effect of fade in left with a delay of 600. Or was it 800? I can't remember what that. So that's going to be 0246. So it will be 600. So something like that. And then the actual container itself, we could just do a fade in as it is. So custom CS motion effects. Let's do a fade. Let's do a fade in left. And let's actually make this go a little bit slower still. So maybe 1 second. And you can see that's going to do the whole lot. So that's not exactly what we was hoping for. I was hoping to just fade in the background color, but that's not going to let me do that. That's okay. Let's just remove that. And that for now is looking good. I am actually going to add a slight transparency to this container because at the minute it is set as a solid purple accent. So I do want to add a slight opacity to it so that we can see a little bit through it, something like that. And that for me is looking good. So of course we could center that if we wanted, but I think as a hero for our About Us page, I think this is looking good. So I'm going to hit Command and S to save this as and then we can pick the rest of this design up in the next lesson.